In every quiet town, behind every locked door, something lingers, waiting to be remembered. These are the stories whispered in the dark. True or not, they stay with you just the same. Welcome to the Fright Brothers, where the living tell the tales, and the dead refuse to forget.
Hello and welcome back to the Fright Brothers podcast. I am Josh Carroll.
And I'm Cody Hagen.
And today we have a bit of a different episode for you. Today we're going to go over some Irish folklore, mainly in part because we received a shout out on another podcast. Rob Billington and Eamon O'Neill gave us a shout out on their podcast Monster Fuzz, and we greatly appreciate that. And we decided, in honor of them, we would do a couple of Irish folktales.
With that being said, and who you said this is pseudo-dedicated to, I'll go ahead and apologize for any mispronunciation that might occur.
We are just a couple of simple southern podcasters, and we don't know Gaelic very well. So, we're going to go over some Irish vampires today, starting off with the Abhartach. I'm hoping that's how it's pronounced. I've heard it pronounced Abhartach a bunch of different ways, but the most common one I found was Abhartach. So, the Abhartach is an early Irish legend, first collected in a Patrick Weston Joyce's The Origin of History in Irish Names and Places. Some people have thought that this is one of the inspirations for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Obviously, the name and the regionality that Dracula inhabits is more based off of, Vlad the Impaler. The powers and the lust for blood, they believe, comes from the Abhartach. This is an excerpt from Joyce's History of Irish Names and Places. There is a place in the parish of Errigal in Londonderry called Slaterity, but it ought to have been called Leteverty, or Lach, the sepulchral moment of the Abhartach, or dwarf. The dwarf was a magician and dreadful tyrant. After having perpetrated great cruelties on the people, he was last vanquished and slain by a neighboring chieftain, some say by Finn MacCool. He was buried in a standing posture, but the very next day he appeared in his old haunts, more cruel and vigorous than ever. And the chief slew him a second time, and buried him as before, but again he escaped from the grave, and spread terror through the whole country. The chief then consulted a druid, and according to the directions, he slew the dwarf a third time, and buried him in the same place, with his head downwards, which subdued his magical powers, so that he never again appeared on earth. The Lach, raised over the dwarf, is still there, and you may hear a legend with much detail from the natives of the place, one of whom it told it to me. And that comes from Patrick Joyce's history that he wrote. So, basically, from what that's saying and from the stories I've read, there used to be a chieftain in Londonderry, Ireland, who was cruel and knew dark magics. And one day, the warrior Finn MacCool came to slay the chieftain. However, the next moonlit night, he reappeared demanding drink in the form of blood from his once people that he ruled over. And once again, MacCool came back to slay the chieftain. Well, upon hearing that he had returned a third time, MacCool had to go find a druid to find out how to slay this creature. And most of the stories have said that he needed to make a sword of yew in order to slay him, and then bury him upside down. There are also stories that claim that he placed a boulder on top of the grave, and there is actually a tree with a boulder next to it in this location, and it's known as the Giant's Grave. Now, reading all of that, and knowing the traditional vampire lore and how to kill them, knowing that pine is one of the things used, I can see how that was something that got translated from yew, not being as popular of a tree in America for sure, but elsewhere I know yew is not a very widespread type of tree.
Yeah, and then within the whole mythos of vampires, it just sort of shifted to just wood in general.
Yes, and also burying him upside down might also account for vampires sleeping upside down in some iterations.
That could be possible inspiration.
Yeah. But I think it's kind of interesting to think about this. Like, Bram Stoker is an Irish native. He hails from Dublin.
Oh, okay.
So seeing that this would be something that connected over into his works, coming up with the vampire, definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I can see that. And the only thing, he just wanted to shift the setting and whatnot to just add a little bit more allure to it, I'd imagine.
Yeah, there's something mysterious and romantic about Transylvania.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So there are some other iterations further on that people might come across. So eventually the story has been changed, and it was not a druid who the hero consults, but a saint. And that can kind of just...
Oh, that would have definitely just been with the changing of times, where they're like, yeah, we don't really...
Yeah.
They're like, Christ is king kind of thing. Like, we're not going to elaborate that he sought that kind of help.
Back when St. Patrick came to Ireland and cleared the place of snakes, aka the pagans. But yeah, I definitely think this is kind of an interesting take on the vampire mythos. Obviously, it's probably one of the first iterations of a vampire to be known. I mean, most vampires come from Dracula. We don't have, I can't think of many older vampires. There are probably other ones in other regions and nations that we can get down into at a further point, but having something this old connected to something as ancient as like the early Celts and the early Gauls of Ireland and England, it's very interesting to see. I like going in and like digging down into the roots of some of our more popular monsters.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to, when I was going into this on my own before this podcast, was seeing just like the most basic elements that were attached to the idea of a vampire before so many other things were added. Like, there's no religious iconography needed to suppress any kind of thing. It's just a simple, oh, this is a beast of this certain nature, and you need to craft a wooden sword specifically of you, as opposed to be like, no, it has to be a stake, and you have to like hammer it into his heart, or like as in Dracula as well, where it's like, oh, you also get to fill their mouth with garlic after you kill them with the stake.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that have come later in the vampire mythos of how to kill them that I'm sure stem from something else, like silver being something, because silver does have antibiotic or antimicrobial properties, and considering that, vampires are impure and unclean, I can see how that comes from it. I find it super interesting to get to some of the more roots and the foundations of what we love and consume on a daily basis. One more interesting thing I would like to add is one of the stories I was listening to said that the Abhartach had a wife who he had locked up in a tower because he was extremely jealous, and that'll kind of come up in the next story, the next creature that we talk about. But one thing I did notice that I thought was kind of funny was that the word Abhartach is closely related to the Irish word for dwarf, if not the word for dwarf, and it makes me, it's kind of funny to think that there is this horribly destructive person who became a vampire but was a dwarf. Like, I'm thinking of like the leprechaun from the movie Leprechaun, just this little evil bastard just kind of running around drinking people's blood, coming back every night after being killed.
That is a pretty funny visage, and honestly, if Warwick Davis is down for it, we should probably try to get someone to make that a movie.
Yeah, I'm down for it. So yeah, the Abhartach, interesting little piece of Irish history and a little Irish lore.
Yeah, it is a very interesting bit of folklore, and also just because of its, the current relevance of this movie is like, couldn't help but think a little bit of Sinners, since the main vampire in that movie is just Irish.
Yes, I actually had the exact same thought, and I just now remembered it until you said this now. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, I wonder if that has anything to do with why the vampire in Sinners was Irish. Because it would make sense if vampires are truly ancient creatures. Yeah, there would be an Irish vampire. And if the myth originated from Ireland, and that's where like the original vampire came from, it'd make perfect sense that this guy, they should have had Peter Dinklage playing. I think that would have been more lore accurate.
Well, there's a little, because it's not an exact dwarf, because it's like dwarf or distorted person, so it's not, but I agree. I agree.
That's
If
true.
it does
That's
mean
true. It
dwarf,
could be dwarf
again,
or
I'm not 100% on that. If it does mean dwarf, absolutely.
We could have had either Peter Dinklage or the guy who played the Hunchback in 300. One of the two.
Either one, yeah.
It would have been very lore accurate.
Or let's just get Peter Dinklage, but in his get-up from the new Toxic Avenger.
Perfect. That's our vampire. There's our Abhartach. All right. So the next one we're gonna go down on. No, let's cut that. We are not going down on this one. We're gonna go down. This story is the Dearg Due. Once again, I apologize for the pronunciation. However, the Dearg Due also roughly translates to the red sucker or the red bloodsucker, is another vampire from Ireland. This one hails from Waterford, and this one is a female vampire. While some vampires are just kind of born from, transformation or disease, this one is based on revenge. It's a revenge vampire. So the story goes, long ago, in an area that is now Waterford, a young girl with beauty so astounding that men were besotted with her, and women wanted to be her, was happily living day to day, and had the love of a farm laborer. They made plans to marry and have children of their own. Her father, however, was not a kind man and cared nothing for love and innocence. Avarice and prosperity were his masters, and his unfortunate daughter his servant. He promised her to a wealthy and notoriously atrocious clan chieftain in exchange for riches and lands for himself and remaining offspring. So just off that, there is a father who is promising his daughter to an atrocious clan chieftain. I wonder if that had anything to do with the Abhartach.
Yeah. No, I do like this potential interlinking of their folklore, where it kind of lends some level of credibility, where it's like, no, this is what happened. Like these important people were interacting in this way, where it's not just like an isolated incident kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that explicitly says that they were connected, but you could use some inference to be like, I wonder if this is the same chieftain. Granted, you can't say there was only one bad chieftain in the entire history of Ireland.
Nope, he's the only one.
Ancient
he's
history.
The only one, actually.
He was so bad, everyone else was like, at least I'm not that guy. He was like the Hitler of clan chieftains. He's like, nah. We all compared him to that guy. However, the marriage was arranged, and the date for the wedding was set. All the begging in the world from our poor bride-to-be was not enough to move the cold, empty heart of her father or her betrothed. On the day of the wedding, everyone dressed in their finery, and the bride was a vision of beauty, dressed in red and gold. As all the guests partied through the night, one person sat away from them all, damning her father and vowing to seek revenge on those who cost her her love and life. The chieftain turned out to be far more abusive and controlling than his new wife could ever have imagined. To him, the poor girl was nothing but a trophy to be locked away for his pleasure only, savoring the knowledge she was his and his alone. She was so depressed, so lonely, and with complete absence of hope, that she simply wasted away, not eating or drinking, just existing, her life gone long before her body gave in. Her burial was a modest affair. Her husband had taken another wife before she was even cold, and her family was too engrossed in their wealth and their greed to give her a second thought. One man grieved, though, her lost love. He visited her grave every single day, telling her of his undying love and praying for her return to his arms. Sadly, his love was not the driving force for her resurrection. Revenge was the force that pulled her from the grave on the first anniversary of her death. Consumed with anger and the need for retribution, she climbed from her coffin and headed straight to her childhood home. As her father lay sleeping, she touched her lips to his and sucked the life out of him. Revenge not yet sated, she called upon her callous husband, finding him surrounded by women, fulfilling his lustful desires, oblivious to the dead bride in the room. In a furious rage, she launched on the chieftain, sending the women screaming. His former wife was so full of fury and fire that she not only drew every breath, but drained every ounce of blood from his twisted and cruel body. Okay, so that kind of puts to bed that they're related, but it is kind of an interesting nod that the stories have similarities to them.
I mean, something I do like about the way that these two stories are structured is it's less of like a cautionary tale for the individual and more so of those with power. because both of it's always been the leader or the chieftain is the reason this place has been blighted.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's not like a fairy tale, like a German fairy tale. It's like, oh, don't go out in the woods, or you might get taken by a witch, or there might be an owl that claws your eyes out. No, it's just like, hey, if you're an absolutely terrible person, something's going to come back, and you're going to get yours. But it's also kind of not even a cautionary tale so much as, hey, there are these creatures out here who will kill you if you do these things. With the Abhartach, it wasn't even like a cautionary tale. It's more of like a hero myth.
Well, no, that's what I'm suggesting is that it's not that it's for the individual to do any sort of action. It's more so that the corruption of those with power is what brings these evils onto
I see what
humanity.
You're saying.
Because I mean,
it's an absolute power corrupts absolutely tale.
Yes.
Okay, I get that. Yeah, that's exactly what these are. I can definitely see that. Scarlet liquid surging through her, she felt more alive than she had ever been, and she had a hunger for blood that could not be sated. So eager to satisfy the impossible, the love who had wished her back to life was forgotten, and such was his good fortune, for he would have been another victim of her bloodlust. Our corpse bride used her beauty to prey on young men, luring them to their demise with seduction, the promise of her body as the reward. Instead, she sank her teeth into their exposed necks, drank their blood to quench her thirst and desire, but it was never enough. The warm red elixir of life gave her strength and immortality, and she hungered for her next quarry. The remains of the Dearg Due, also called the Dearg Due, are buried in Waterford in a place known as Strongbow's Tree. Her lustful yearning can only be satisfied on the day she died. So on the eve of the anniversary, locals gather and position rocks upon her grave so that she will not rise and take the blood of the innocent. Sometimes, though, the rocks are displaced, forgotten, or her insatiable desire is stronger than any stone could ever be, and she walks into the night, ill-fated men, falling victim to the beauty and the bloodlust of the Dearg Due. So once again, you see, we have the trees and the stones on the grave as being something that can deter a entombed vampire from returning.
Yeah, I definitely see that as like just sort of using nature to suppress that which is unnatural.
Yeah, there's definitely some kind of connecting thread for all of these tales. So yeah, there once again we have the bloodlust. This one actually has the vampire in question draining the blood from the necks of their victims, much like modern day vampires do, especially Dracula. So I'm wondering if this, with him being from with Stoker being from Ireland, he probably drew on a lot more than just one or two influences. He probably had, he obviously had several influences. I'm wondering if there's, somebody told me creativity is taking a little bit of everybody's work and then claiming it as your own.
Oh, you pick bits and pieces,
I'm wondering, is there any, I need to find out when this legend was first introduced, if it was much earlier than that, or if this one adopted elements of Dracula. So from what I'm reading, it looks like the first mention of the Dearg Due is in a 1924 book, Vampires and Vampirism, which would probably put that before Dracula, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that was well after both of these were published.
I was like, 1992, that does not seem correct. That is the movie. Okay, so yes. So I'm thinking that, going back on what I said earlier, I'm convinced that the Legend of the Dearg Due is inspired by Dracula and the Abhartach, because Dracula was published in 1897. So definitely after, Abhartach, then you had Dracula, then you had the Dearg Due. So, yeah, that might be, I definitely like the connections, but it seems more of a rehashing of different pieces of the first two. Still an interesting story.
I do like that these, at least the one with the Abhartach didn't paint vampirism as negative a light as the second one, but the second one how'd you pronounce it? The Dearg Due?
Dearg Due, yeah.
Yeah, the Dearg Due. Did not seem none of that seemed pleasant for
anybody involved.
Yeah, like the person who was under this curse was not enjoying it, and obviously none of the people in the vicinity were.
Yeah, I just imagine
really do anything about it because it just seems like, oh, you can't stop it. It's just going to come back yearly.
Yeah, year after year. There's nothing to. Well, I mean, you might be able to drive a stake through its heart, or use a sword made of you and bury it upside down. Who knows? I don't know if that's the same kind of vampirism. And that's the other thing. They're not connected that much to where it's like, this is what caused this one. Like the Abhartach he practiced dark magic, so he had essentially made a deal with the devil, or deal with an ancient entity, whereas the Dearg Due is just a revenge spirit,
right?
That is a vampiric entity. So there's no telling if what would kill one would kill the other. It's not always what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So this might be all they can do to stop her from coming back as much as they can. What would you do if you were out on the streets of Waterford and you were walking around and you had had one too many drinks and you saw a beautiful, pale, red-haired woman approaching you? You'd probably, you probably wouldn't. But if you were a single man...
No, if I were single, I'd be dead.
Yeah.
I'd go ahead and
I mean,
that.
that's the thing. It's like, some of these people don't do anything wrong. They're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But so are any vampiric victims. So that one's more of just a tragic tale. Just a tragic tale of revenge.
Yeah.
And a young girl who suffered at the hands of those who had greed. Once again, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
So you got a third story for us today, or a third creature?
Yeah. So we have a third. This one is not such a vampire as one would consider. They're not an undead being or a blood-sucking entity, but they are a vampire of sorts. And that would be the Leanan, or fairy lover, as it is translated into. This is actually a tale of a fairy, like an Irish fairy. With the Leanan, it is an entity that seeks out those who have talent but want to be more talented. And the Leanan embodies a dual nature. She is both an alluring source of autistic inspiration. She's an alluring source of artistic inspiration, and a dangerous figure who leads her lovers to ruin. Her beauty and charm are irresistible, but her love can become destructive. This duality echoes themes found in many other mythological traditions, where muses or supernatural beings offer both gifts and curses to mortals who become entangled with them. So essentially what she does is she finds somebody who has some talent and gives them more talent and takes them on as a lover. Well, every time they interact with each other intimately, she drains their life force. So you would have these people who are great poets or great artists, but they would be very short-lived. So she's not a vampire in the sense of like blood, but she is like an energy vampire, which is a type of vampire. If you've ever watched What We Do in the Shadows, she's basically Colin Robinson, but much more attractive. And there's another...
Oh, I can see this as kind of like a precursor to the idea of the candle that burns twice as bright burns like half as long, kind of a idiom, where at least at this point you're still agreeing to go into this deal, maybe without the knowledge that it's going to cost you the majority of your life.
Of course. Yeah, I could see this being one of those things that people would explain, like, oh, he was so talented, but he died so young, it must have been the Leanan. Kind of a way to explain, people's burnouts, or even, having great talent leading to abusing your body, or even, early deaths.
Oh, and because to master anything, you're going to have to sacrifice something in your life, some quality of your life, rather.
Most of us sacrifice our sanity. Some sacrifice our lives, but that's another interesting occurrence of an immensely beautiful entity coming for you and then draining your life force. This one takes course over many years, whereas something like the Dearg Due does it in a couple of minutes, drains you like a Capri Sun This one eats you more like a jawbreaker.
Now, is it ever stated if the Leanan Shi only targets men?
I can look. Let's see. I didn't read anything about one side or the other. It just says that she targets creative individuals, so it could be men or women.
Okay.
Equal, and with it being fairies, they typically, in most mythology, they don't. They're all pretty much pansexual. They go for whoever they can find as long as they meet their desires. So yeah. Whereas the Dearg Due, she specifically targets men.
Well, that one, yeah, with the Dearg Due, that makes sense because that's revenge on like an evil man.
Yeah. This is just a predator looking for prey.
That hatred is directed. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, so it says that, the easiest way to deal with the Leanan Shi is to just not feed her because she cannot remain in the human world without sustenance. However, you can escape the Leanan Shi. So if anyone out there ever comes into contact with a beautiful, beautiful Irish woman who's offering you talents and companionship, and you fall for it, there is a way to leave. There is a way to escape the Leanan Shi. And this is a PSA to all those out there who might come in contact. Though Leanan Shi is an enchanting and dangerous figure, some stories suggest that her influence can be resisted or escaped. Folktales sometimes mention that those who manage to break free from her spell must do so through great effort, often with the help of protective charms or seeking the aid of a wise elder or druid. So you can probably find a wise elder. Good luck finding a druid nowadays. However, the escapes are rare, so just don't be going around. If something is too good to be true, it probably is.
Just a thought I had from that line that you said where the Leanan Shi needs sustenance to exist in our world.
Mm-hmm.
I immediately connected it to the story we read last week or 2 weeks ago, the talent right on time.
Oh yeah.
Is the curator just like a male version of Leanan Shi?
Maybe.
Because like just the idea, I mean, or at least inspired by it.
Yeah.
It's just interesting though, because specifically he needs like blood just to exist in our realm for a certain amount of time.
I mean, there is the blood and there is the needing to have sustenance to remain. I was thinking of it more of like a crossroads demon needing to.
Right, but that point, the way that this is worded, I wonder if this is like an inspiration for that crossroads demon. But that crossroads demon idea just comes from like taking this older, more pagan idea and just attaching it to like Christian ideas, where like, oh, there's this demonic entity that will meet you at certain points, and it requires something from you to give you something. Because even in Talent Right on Time, like it was literally for talent.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good connection. That is interesting. I guess I could probably reach out to find out, but it does have some similarities to that. I didn't even make that connection. Yeah, because it needs something from you in order to stay here, and then it gives you talent, essentially. Granted, it can give you anything, but they were wanting talent. Oh, and you know what? It also says that she bestows gifts upon those that she is with. That could be like the watch.
Yeah.
However, the only difference would be that the individuals that she is taking on as her wards are her lovers. Yeah. That'd be kind of weird in that story if they were lovers. It's an inspiration. Yeah, it's an inspiration.
And that's why, but that's just to circle back. And just to circle back what we said, you take little bits of someone else's work, or everybody else's work, and claim it as your own kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. That's a decent connection. Oh, vampires. We love them. They love to suck blood.
Yeah, vampires. Don't they suck?
They suck. I would be interested to see, I wanted to look up, see if there's any media, any movies or shows that involve these. Because you can see little bits and pieces of each of these tales throughout the mythos of the vampire as we have it today. We might cover some more stories on vampires. I might start going down a rabbit hole and looking up vampires of different nations and regionalities and finding things that we can connect. We're going to have like one of those boards that Charlie has in Always Sunny in Philadelphia, just connecting vampires to each other.
Pepe Sylvia. Pepe Sylvia.
Anything you'd like to add to this?
Well, not really in the sense of adding any more lore or anything, but this has piqued an interest for me to now look into the history of vampires. Because just seeing all the different little aspects of what is now considered like the definitive vampire, but all these like little aspects from wildly different stories.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, and in the same vein of what you were saying, I would love to have another episode where we delve a little bit further into other, maybe different, like completely different continents. Because I know there are definitely vampires in African folklore as well that we could definitely talk about.
Well, I know the true way to kill a vampire.
And what is that?
Well, what you do is you sell your company to Disney, and then COVID happens, and then there's years of production delays, and that's how you really kill a vampire.
I miss Blade. I miss Blade so much.
Yeah. Oh, I really hope I really hope they go through with that. But we'll still wait. Blade, the true vampire hunter vampire, the only one that matters. Every other vampire has been based off Blade. Even if they didn't know it, it's all
retroactively.
It's all Blood Raid, man. Well, I think that'll do it for today's episode.
Yep, so thank you listeners for tuning in today. I hope you like the new format, and this is the third of our 3 rotations, so next episode we'll be getting back to classic literature. So if you have any suggestions, please put them in the comments, and leave us a good 5-star rating if you would on Spotify and Apple Music. And everything else to say, Josh?
And once again, thank you to Rob Billington and Eamon O'Neill over on the Monster Fuzz podcast. Please go over and give them a listen and follow their podcast as well. I've been listening to it for years, and it's a pretty fun podcast to listen to.
And as always, the intro was provided by Travis Bilger. Artwork was provided by Mark Parlier Jr.
Make sure you go join our Discord. Link to it will be in the description of the episode. Thank you and good night.
Good night, everyone.